We're starting.
Official.
Our first one. Let's do some
Yep.
celebrations.
This is my celebration. Can you see?
Oh yes, I
Ooh.
know
Do you
exactly
know
what
what a
that
big
one
deal
is.
it is for this to come to Louisville? This is a big deal. We're like last on the list. So I was like, oh, I get a fancy drink.
That's awesome.
Super fun.
I've got pink lemonade,
Yummy.
the last of the pink lemonade before we leave here and head back.
Well, do we
Yes.
want to just roll in, or do you want to? Tanya had mentioned about like gratitude for where we are right now. If there's anything that we want to.
I
Yeah,
love
we're
when you all lead a good, like, Tanya, you're so good at like, let's all get in the breath or like dance or something. Like, what is something that we can do to just kind of like bring us together in this moment?
let's start out with a breath together, just all kind of finding that delicious, lovely space right inside of ourselves that's connected to each of us, and also the couple of people that aren't with us in this particular moment, David, Carrie, and Erica are all not here. Who knows? Maybe one of these days we'll get David to join us as well. But I'd like to just like tune them in with us and then just really drop into that deliciousness in our hearts and sort of visualize, maybe on an in breath, think about taking in all the unconditional love that surrounds us and bringing that right into our heart space, that space that connects each one of us together. That gives me tingles of that. And when we exhale, just knowing that every time we exhale, it is us just exchanging any old stories, anything that is ready to be recycled back into whatever form it needs to be in, so that it can come back to us as unconditional love and just find that delicious space within our hearts. Yay!
My crazy energy just went.
Yeah. So, like, how about each one of us going around and just one thing that we're grateful for right now, whatever's going on. Maybe it has to do with relationships, maybe it doesn't. Let's go alphabetical.
Great.
I was like, yay.
On the spot.
I am extremely grateful that my sense of awareness seems to be growing day by day.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's a wonderful thing and sometimes it's a oh shit kind of thing, but it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to have that expanding on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So good. I am grateful for my relationship to my body right now. I notice I woke up. I feel like there's an up leveling happening, and I woke up. Well, last night I noticed my eyes were itching and I have like hives on my neck. And just like now I'm getting so in tune with my body of like, oh, this is like the last time I had this was like, I had the extreme eczema underneath my underarms, and like I'm noticing it again. And so just like it's not a problem, right? But this is just like my nervous system. I want to like recalibrating or just like, okay, it just needs some more attention and some space.
Mm. That's good.
So good.
I'm noticing my judgment of my gratitude. I was like, I'm just grateful for all the great things. And you all are talking about like the growth and the sticky stuff, right? I got to go to hot yoga today. And so I'm like incredibly grateful for that time that I'm carving for myself. And today I was just incidentally positioned next to a very, very, very elite instructor. She was taking the class. And so everything that I have been like working through to get to, she like leveled it up like 7 times. And I was like, okay, ego, you are doing your best. Like on your mat, everything is great. Like some days I just need to be upright on my mat and that's a success. But today I was just like noticing that I wasn't trying to compete with her. Right. But anyway, obviously the most important thing that I'm happy for me is the time, because that's a big thing for me to give to myself.
That's awesome. I am deep in gratitude today for the sticky stuff, as well as the, like, just witnessing all of you guys, like our friendships. So much gratitude, because like we've been along this whole route of learning to embrace the shitty stuff, the stuff that feels really gross, the stuff that's like the fertilizer, learning to embrace that. And Christy, remembering like that that space of just like being in the good stuff, like appreciating the good stuff too. So good. I'm grateful for all of our connections. I'm grateful to be like connected to all of you and connected to my husband in the last couple of weeks that I've had that are just like blowing shit up next level too. So yeah, for sure, for sure. One of these days I'm going to learn just to buy a waterproof mascara, because
Right.
I think it's pretty much like a given that I'm going to start crying. I've been crying off and on all day today. I bawled through my meditation this morning, and then I cried when I was talking to y'all on in the happy place in our group Marco Polo, and yeah.
I was putting mascara on today and I thought the same thing. I was like, is this necessary? I'm like, well, I'll start. It'll be a start.
I remember when I first started working with a coach, and gosh, the relationship that I had with her was we had this really strong connection when we met, and it was inevitable that we needed to connect. And when I started working with her, like I literally would barely pick up the phone and the tears would just start. And I remember thinking, you fool, you idiot, like you're spending, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars. Get your shit together, woman. Like you're spending all this time crying on the phone call. You're wasting. Like, do you know how expensive she is an hour? And you're spending all this time crying. And I had, even though it wasn't a video call, I had still like put on makeup and everything. And about the third call in, I was just finally like, no, I figured this shit out. I don't do anything with the face before I get on the phone, because yeah, it's going to be everywhere.
And isn't it interesting how much we can judge that emotion, like giving the space for that emotion to actually come up and out?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's always my Friday night, Erin. I mean, is it always my Friday night that I'm texting you like I'm about to lose it? And you're like, let it flow, hon. I'm like, I'm walking out the door. Like it's always my Friday night. But like, when do we give ourselves permission or the time to just like release it all?
Well, just notice like you've had a story of, I don't have time
Right.
for this. Like it's not on the schedule.
Right.
Crying, like, can we reschedule that from between 3:30 and 4 o'clock? Because it just doesn't fit right now. But that's not how life works.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, that could totally segue into a relationship. I will say
What time?
my
Tears.
my last Friday, this past Friday, when I was like having my major shame, Brenda, you didn't get to experience this. I kind of only connected with Erin and Tanya here, but I was having a lot of shame about a money situation. And both of them held so much space for me emotionally, just like allowing it to come up and out and for me to give myself compassion. But one of the people that I feel really uncomfortable being shameful around is my husband, because he has his own money stories. And a lot of times we don't see eye to eye on money stories. And I just sat in the floor of my closet crying, like sobbing. And he came in and he witnessed me crying. And the first thing he said was, without going into detail about the money situation, he was just like, I really don't care what you do. Like, this can be your decision. I'm going to stay out of it. I'm here for you. Like, he just kind of like put down all of his money story. And then he just kind of sat there, and God love him. He goes, do you want me to touch you? Do you want me to like hug you? And I was just like, actually, I do. Like, I just really wanted him to just like hold me for a second. And that has come like leaps and bounds in our relationship. And I think so much of that is because of the work I'm doing, right? Like, I had to be in a space to give myself the time to cry, to give myself the time to be vulnerable, to not blame him for all of the emotions that I was feeling. And then he was able to meet me and kind of like witness where I needed him, right? I didn't need him to fix my money story. I knew I need to do that work. But yeah, just, I mean, it's a little complicated to say that without all the details, but I'm like, it's such a beautiful storyline. Like, all the things I've blamed my husband for.
And the receiving, right? Like, this ties
Yes.
into receiving
Yes.
of like,
Yes.
I think it's so fitting that we chose women in relationships as our first like chat, if you want to call it that, right? Because
Yep.
in order for all of us to be here, we have all had to want this type of relationship and also been in a space where we can receive it. I think that so often we want things, but we block it unknowingly. And at least for me, my story has been around women and how they might be. And so I've just pushed it away because it's just too painful to have friends. But I've been the one that's not been allowing it to come, right? And so, at least for me, when I decided I wanted to have friends, I didn't know how to do that, right? Because for so long, I've spent plenty of years telling myself all of the stories about how women are, but not knowing that that was actually me blocking it all along. So you being able to have, you know, Craig be able to hold you and you receive it, because you could have easily rejected that, right?
Yeah.
But being in that receiving space. And so,
yeah, receiving is a big learning curve for me right now. It's everywhere, all over the place.
It's everything, right?
It really is everything that I've never been modeled. Like,
Yeah.
my mother was the most, and still is, like the most selfless human, and everybody like praised her for it. And it was probably her mother as well, right? Like, it's just like a generational, almost, I don't want to say a curse, but you know, like, it's just something that just like falls down the family line.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just like, it's okay. It's okay.
I just want to like note something. Our first call here, we have a nice, beautiful, harmonious balance between love and power. We talk about this a lot in our group. And of course, Christy, you've got love right behind you. Do what you love, be who you are, be your love. I want to just introduce this concept into the whole thing about relationships, because I think it also has to do with how we receive and what we allow ourselves to connect with. So I have this theory: we're all love and power, like the egg and the sperm, the seed and the soil, right? and that to be in harmonious balance, love has to completely encase power, and power has to come through love, right? And so in the last couple of weeks, what's come to my awareness is noticing, like, Erin and Brenda, you are both the sort of like the power dominance has been prevalent in your life, whereas the love has been tucked away and hidden inside. And Christy, you and I have been all about like love dominance, but our power has been tucked away deep inside. And oftentimes when we're out of balance that way, it's because we are unresourced. We talk about that a lot, right? So just noticing those things are within us. And in that moment, Craig was showing you some of that love that's inside of you, and you were actually allowing yourself to receive it. Like, it's always been here, but when we are so focused on the thing that we are lacking, or the thing that we think that we don't have in abundance, then that is the thing we have a hard time receiving, because we're just looking at where we potentially are losing it. So like, you and I have been super concerned about losing love and connection, and that like that worthiness, belonging.
Yep.
And Brenda and Erin, similar, but it shows up in a different format, for like power, that strength, that safety, that protection, the like the things that you think that if you are lacking, that like if there is lack, that you're not safe. So
I think it shows up in power, like from a protective place, right? Like you said, like very much so, like it's a self-preservation. So I don't want to get hurt. So I'm just going to cut it off before it even starts. Like the pushing away already, because it is too painful, right? It's too much to be so vulnerable, so raw, because we have plenty of stories of where we, you know, it got us, right? Like where we, got us, or I don't want to say affected us, but like joke's on you kind of thing, you know? And so we do this, at least for me, I don't know about you, Brenda, from a power place, it's like, it's so easy for me to just shut down, because then it's a guarantee I won't be hurt in my ego mind, right? But not really, right? Like how much we long for connection, all of us, whether love or power, right? Like, and we always have it within us, but just allowing ourselves to go there and to be seen, and I don't know with you, Brenda, tell me your thoughts on this, but like with power, I feel like it's like, then I'm broken because I've been able to do everything by myself. So if I need someone, or I allow someone to come in, then I'm weak, you know?
It is a protective mechanism though, because, you know, I don't know anybody else's stories, but my stories around friendships, female primarily, are, you know, they're out to get something from me. They want something from me. They, what can I do for them, either emotionally or financially? And it's not, in my storied past, has not been equitable exchange of those things, right? It's always been one-sided for me. It's like, well, I'll be blunt and honest here. I've gone after friendships in the past with a rescue mentality. Find somebody I can rescue, and if I rescue you, then you will like me and we'll be friends. And then that turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy of, they want something from me, they continue to want something from me. It doesn't evolve into that kind of friendship. And yeah, that's where I've come from. And it's a lot easier to just not try, right? It's a lot easier to not get hurt. If you're not capable of going through the whole thing, like, I'll rescue you, but if you're not going to live up to your part of it, is it worth it to me then? Right? And that's been mine. So it's easier to not. And it's really, really hard to open yourself up in a vulnerable space, as opposed to, I can dish out superficial crap and be friends with people all day long, but they're really only just acquaintances, because I'm not letting you in. I'm not letting you in, and that then becomes, you know, a further barrier that I've thrown up, is I'll give you the opportunity to be my friend, but I'm really not there with you. So it's a lot of power and control, because it's like, one thing you feel like you can absolutely control is who you allow in. And shutting them off, it's easy.
I think that is so interesting. Like, just thinking about the first time that we met, Brenda, I feel like when I jumped in that van, y'all picked me up at the airport, and I was just like immediately connected to everybody there. And I think of, like, when you say that you can be superficial all day long, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I want to know your blood type. I want to know what you ate for breakfast this morning. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, when did you have your first kiss? Like, I'm like, give me all the juice. And the superficial stuff, I'm like, meh, this is boring.
You immediately want to go for the
I'm like,
intimacy.
connection, love, like, come on, bring it to me. And that's so interesting that you're like, here's me at a distance, and then maybe in time there'll be some connection. But it's just so funny, like observing different personalities and different interests. And
It's so interesting, Chrissy, that you say that, because when you said, oh, I want to go all in, I'm like, I'm going to sit out on the sidelines and I'm going to evaluate everyone, and I'm going to make sure
yes,
it's worth my time, my effort, my sacred space, my heart to like invest in. I don't want to say size you up, right? But like, I just want to make sure. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to watch the game for a while, and then I'm going to.
And don't get me wrong, like there are some people that, like, my first gut instinct is like, mm-mm. And that's okay. Like, I can also like allow space for that to change. But I could totally see, Erin, that you would want to be more of an observer and like find your one-on-one opportunity than to just like jump right in the middle.
Well, that's like kind of the thing too that I've noticed is like, so I had to learn how to do it one-on-one first. Like I've always said like, oh, I'm just a one-on-one person, but that was only because I couldn't, I couldn't hold the space for having several girlfriends, right? Like I didn't even know how to have the one-on-one. So like, I don't want to say mastering the one-on-one, but like learning how to do that, trusting, right? That like people actually can love you unconditionally, because there hasn't really been a model for me, right? So then once you like learn and you have that foundation of the one-on-one, then expanding, to multiple women and having multiple friendships. Like when we were at the restaurant, and Brenda, you said to Tanya, like, I've never had 6 girlfriends before, and I resonated with that, right? Because I've never had 6 girlfriends before, because I think I've always come from this place, like somebody's going to get mad at somebody some point in time. So I'll just remove myself from the situation, that self-preservation. And so having that foundation first of knowing how to have that close, intimate relationship, right? One-on-one, and then, expanding. It's just like anything though, right? Like we can't have more of something until we learn how to do.
And
I'm still learning.
I'm like, to that point, don't you think the intimate relationship is with yourself first?
Yes.
Right? Like when we're just in these relationships to make other people happy or to fix them or to rescue them or, whatever, to please everybody. People pleaser, number one, right here. And then you like sacrifice your own happiness and you're like, I don't understand why nothing's making me happy. Let me change all of my friendships. Let me change my job. Let me change everything. And it's like, oh, wait a second. It started here, right? To even know, what did I just ask myself this week? What was my favorite Halloween candy? I was like, I don't know. So I had to like just really, I mean, not that it's really super significant, but just
But
these
it
little
is.
reminders, right? And I was like, oh, it's totally, well, in the moment, it's totally caramel M&Ms. But
But it is a big deal though. Like
took me a
it's
minute to
not
think
because
about
it's,
it.
yeah.
I had the thought for the longest time. Julia Roberts had a movie called Runaway Bride,
Mhm.
and uh, her, she was being followed around, interviewed. Why do you leave? Like you never show up at the altar. This reputation is the runaway bride, and he finds her in a diner at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert, you guys. So, like, if any of you are just like, don't ruin this for me, they find her at the diner at the end of this thing, and she has all these different kinds of eggs. She's got scrambled eggs, over easy, fried, hard boil, etc. Right, and I'm like, yeah, like I didn't even know how I like my own eggs. I was so busy figuring out how everybody else likes their. Let me take care of that for you. Let me do that for you. Let me make that right for you. And so, Erin, when you were talking about the learning how to do one-on-one first, and then Christy, that was perfect. Like, of course, it's always ourselves first, but we start out looking like way outside of ourselves, going, all of this is the problem out here. And then we bring it in a little closer. All this is like our community, our friends, our family is the problem, until we finally realize like it's all in here. Of course, we start out math, 1 + 1. We don't start out with multiplication tables. Of course, when we get pregnant and have a baby, we don't go, I'd really like to have a baby, and boom, we're like 10 months pregnant, right? It's this progression, this expansion, contraction that is always happening, that we're just growing into. So,
Well, and I
I
think
love-
this is the value of what our conversations have to offer, right? Because how many times do you hear people talking about getting your husband to change, getting your girlfriends to change, change this about this, and then you're going to be happy. And it's like, okay, how much time and money, me included, have you invested in trying to change all of the shit in your life and you still are pissed off? It's like, who is the common denominator, right? And like, not to say that something is broken or wrong here, but it's like all of that attention that I kept pouring into other things, I needed to pour it into me, right? And like figuring out how I liked my eggs, because
and our kids,
oh my
like what we're
gosh.
trying to funnel them into,
Yeah.
right? You need to do it this way, or you need to do it that way. And it's always about
Oh gosh.
our
Always
own
that.
stuff,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I don't even like eggs.
With all your chickens, and you don't
All my
even
chickens,
like
I don't like eggs. I like eggs in things, but I don't want to sit down to an egg breakfast. No.
I like an avocado toast with an egg. I'm learning as I get outside of my life, like out of my home life, that avocado toast doesn't have eggs unless you order it that way. I ordered one. Where were we? In San Francisco. And I was like, excuse me, it didn't come with an egg. And he's like, you didn't order it with one. Like, okay. You don't make it like I do at home? What's wrong?
Isn't that life? Like, we have our stories and we think it's a certain way, and then we get out there and find out it's whatever way we ask for it, and then
Perfect.
can we receive it, right?
Perfect. And maybe even ask for it when it's not the way, right? Like I could have just eaten it that way, but I was like, actually, I want the egg. So can you make that for me? I think that is always it's probably, I'm thinking about how long this has existed, because I did not grow up in this house, but my husband did not ever ask for anything differently at a restaurant. So if it was wrong, or if it was just like not cooked to the right temperature or whatever, he would just be like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And I'm like, no, like, do speak up and say what is wrong or right about it. My daughter will like crawl under the table if I like call a waiter over or waitress over to change something. She's like, Mom, like, but this is something that I don't like. I'm not going to be a butthole about it, but I'm going to get what I ask for.
Oh, this is making me burp because I'm laughing because that's been my husband. And it's an interesting thing to note some of the crosses that we have going on here. Like I was just telling my husband this morning that Aaron and I are like a mirror to each other in our golden path and gene keys. And I have the same birth date as your husband. And
Yes.
so we share a similar profile, but he's definitely more power and I've been more love. Isn't that funny? Because just like your observation about not speaking up or saying something. And I've always been the one that I feel like, I'd like it like this. Will you bring it to me with this on the side? Da, 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 da. And my husband's like, before I met you, I wouldn't even return something to the store if I bought the wrong thing. He's like, no, I wouldn't do that. And so, which ironically enough, like Brenda and I, when we first met, was on a dive trip. And I was at a phase in my life where I was really, really focusing on my health hardcore. I was trying to fix all the outside problems that were going on. I was changing my diet. I was being super strict about what I would eat. And I contacted the resort like months ahead of time to say, like, I need to make sure I have this, I need to make sure I have that, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, we got you. And then when I showed up, some of the things that they promised me that they would have like available for me weren't there. And when I was having the discussion with the waitress, Brenda was like, damn, girls.
High maintenance.
High maintenance. I was just thinking the same thing.
Well, I didn't know the backstory, right? I
Right.
had no idea that this was, something that was prearranged. Like, how could she expect, not knowing that she had requested, how could she expect that they're going to cater to her? This is a buffet system. How are they going to do that? And yeah, that was but on the opposite side, I am one who orders picky. I'll just say that, orders picky. And my husband will turn around, can't you just pick a number?
My
Like
gosh.
you're at the drive-through, pick a number and let's
Yes.
go on. Pick the onions off, do whatever, just pick a number, let's go.
Yes.
And chances are, like at a drive-through, you're not going to get what you ordered anyway, but just pick a number.
I kind of do that to my husband now that I think about that, because I think everything, I'm like, if it has something on it, just take it off. Like when we're talking about a drive-through situation, but he doesn't like sauce. Like he doesn't like any condiments. So if there's sauce on something, you can't just like pick it off, right? Like it kind of touches everything. And if you don't like it, it's like really offensive. And now I'm like, I will check his sandwiches before we leave a drive-through just to make sure there's no sauces, because we've gotten home many a times and he's like, oh, it has mayo on it. I'm like, here's a napkin. He's like, he just throws the bun out the window. No, I'm not eating that. Goodness.
This is really curious. In the realm of power versus love, or those imbalances and how they show up, I'm super curious what your guys's response is, and maybe what you've observed your spouse's response. We had a conversation with our daughter the other night, and an awareness that came to me around my husband was that oftentimes when he feels powerless, he gets mad or frustrated. And I'm thinking back to times when our daughter was young and she would do something, maybe hurt herself or something like that, and he would almost get mad or upset with her, which was super confusing because, it was confusing for me, and I just imagine I'm projecting that it was confusing for her. And I used to see that as like, why are you getting mad? Why aren't you just like doting on her, comforting her, or whatever? So I'm curious, relationships, what have you guys noticed with your spouses and children and stuff? I see, and I'm totally aware now that that's him feeling potentially him feeling powerless about things.
Like, I'll go first, but I'm like trying to hold back.
I saw Erin was going for the
Mhm.
unmute.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, like obviously now how I am is very different to how I used to be, but, and it's such a mirage is the word that comes to me, but that's not the word I'm thinking of. Like, it's all an illusion. There you go. Right. Like we're never really in control, but when you're so used to being in control, then when you're not, right, at least for me, there was a lot of frustration and anger. Like you nailed it. Like frustration and anger comes up because it's just like, this isn't either what I plan to have happen, or it's, and not necessarily when Grayson hurts herself, but just in a place where something happens and you're not able to control all of the pieces of it. Very much so. Anger and frustration, like that's like was and sometimes still is like my go-to of, and frustrated is probably more so, but that I think is because there was just so much anger suppressed below, and then it's just like the constant little bubbles. The frustration is just like that undertone constantly because I think I had repressed so much anger. But yeah, you like feel powerless. You can't make changes or do something. And in terms of like, let's use grace. And I mean, in the past, it was sometimes would be like, well, why are you doing that? Right? Like, of course you're going to get hurt if you're like doing these kinds of things, right? Versus having that compassionate, which going back to bringing it to ourselves, right? Like, of course I couldn't be compassionate with her until I learned how to be compassionate with myself. But yeah, like you're going to do crazy things, expect to get hurt. Like, what do you expect kind of thing? Frustration, maybe more so than, I mean, anger too, right? But
Going
yeah.
after it with the logical mind.
Yes.
Yeah, right, expecting that she would be logical in that regard. In our house, my daughter was the one who got hurt all the time, but she was the one who played sports. So it was usually a sports related injury. And it would get so bad that, not the injuries themselves would get bad, but it would get so often that we would argue about whose turn it was to take her either to the hospital or to urgent care. Because, man, I did it last week, it's your turn this week. And the only time I can remember the interaction with her specifically, as opposed to the interaction with the husband about whose turn it was it was the first time she had a really, really bad migraine. We didn't know what it was at the time, like she was puking in the kitchen sink and she wouldn't stop. And so we took her to the hospital, both of us, because we didn't know what was wrong with her. And me, the control freak, because I've got to, talk to the doctors and I've got to do the paperwork and all the things. And he's there, but I'm not having him do anything. And we get in the room and they put her in the bed and they go and they're going to do a blood test of some sort. And they go to put in one of those butterfly things where they just have to put it in. Well, I don't know what happened, but I don't normally look at blood draws. And I looked and they had blood everywhere. I don't know why or how they got blood everywhere, but it was everywhere. And to see my baby bleeding like that wasn't a wound, right? It was something inflicted upon her that she didn't do herself. I started going down, right? I was losing it and I'm screaming. I'm on the side of the emergency room bed and I'm screaming at myself internally, hold your shit together, get your shit together. You're trying to control it, right? I'm trying to control the situation in my own body and my body is failing me. And I'm just like, my knees are crumpling. It's just the weirdest thing. And then they pulled her out of the bed and put me in the bed. Because I was going down. And
There is nothing worse than when you're about to pass out and it's like your whole body slides down the wall. You're like, okay, surrender.
And I wasn't, I was arguing and arguing and arguing because I thought I had that control over myself, and I was like not willing to lose that. That's how much that control factor is for the power and control. And yeah, the last funny part of that story, and I'll pause, is they hooked me up to the blood pressure and all that, and all the alarms start going off because I was basically passing out. All the alarms go off and the nurse screams down the hallway, "It's the mom!" And then I have to pull myself back together after all this. And of course, it's now a family story, but
Oh God.
I'm just saying there was that much of a power and control
Yes.
issue in regards to my child. I was very concerned and compassionate for her, but I wanted to control all the circumstance around her care. And yeah, took a look up, saw some blood, and control
Yeah.
gone.
I'm done.
That's when it's like you have that part, that love part of you gets like a doorway gets cracked open and you're vulnerable.
Mhm.
And that's death to a power person, right?
Mhm.
Having that vulnerability opened up.
Yeah.
Feel like loss of control or just situations where my lack of control is being shown to me. In the past, I would get like hot, like my whole body, just like steam. You know how like in cartoons where steam shoots out their ears? That is how I would feel. And like seeing red, literally just so angry. And to the point where it was just like, I'm going to control everything. I'm just going to like initiate and, come in and just do it. But then starting to see the patterns of like the resentment that followed from doing all the work, or the disappointment that would follow because I didn't meet everybody's needs, being a people pleaser, the disconnection that I created because people didn't want to be around me when I was a lunatic trying to control everybody and tell everybody what to do. Yeah, it's almost like I had to create those things to realize that it wasn't as important, right? And
Yeah.
to this day, Craig will even say, well, you like to have control. And I'm like, not anymore. Like that's something that I've just kind of outgrown. I do enjoy like organization. So that is different to me than control.
I'm curious, how many of your mothers, if you're willing to share, are the control, like have tried to control to make everything feel good for them? I know that's.
Oh, I'd have to like explore that. I'm thinking, I would always think my father was more controlling than my mother. You think your mom controlled things for you? Is that what you're saying?
More so, she tries to control all the outside external things so she can finally feel
yes.
okay. And so we mirror or
course.
emulate that because that's how we know we think, right? We can feel safe, secure, at ease when we can control all of the outside.
Yeah. And then again, just like highlighting that this is the offer. This is the value that we're bringing to the world, right? These conversations where it's like, yeah, you can totally clean your house and feel better, right? And you could also sit on the couch and rest and feel better, right? Like that clean house doesn't have to mean like a successful day, right? Like a rest, honoring your body, a walk outside, whatever the thing is that like your heart is craving is equally as valuable.
This goes back to, I don't know if you were on the call, Christy, but we were talking, Brenda and Tanya and I were talking about like, but we all want love and connection, but like, where does it come from? Right. So like the energy of like, oh, I just like my house tidy. It looks nice for errands, counters to be like clean, like no stuff on it. I like it, but probably 9 times out of 10, it's not, but it's really nice. Right. But I don't get bent out of shape anymore when it's not. I don't need that, but it's a desire. Right. And the same thing like with connections and friendships or whatever is like, we noticing where we connect through like what kind of energy or vibration. Like so often used to connect to friends where they would kind of commiserate over their spouses, right? And all of the things that are going wrong in our lives. And I wasn't about to say anything about my husband because I didn't have anything to contribute in that term. So then that was like a further disconnection, right? Because if I can't connect over my husband being an asshole, then what am I supposed to connect with? And just noticing how often we want that, we all want that love and connection, but we most of the time don't connect through a higher vibration. And it's not a like, oh, everything's perfect all the time, right? But how much we like to connect over struggle versus thriving or
Yes.
joy and love.
To know that we actually have a choice, right? Like, I feel like that was so much like just convenience relationships, convenience connections, whether it would be like friends of my children's friends, parents of my children's friends, or neighbors, co-workers. Like, how many relationships have we had with people where you're like, if you could choose this, handpick this person, would you? And you're like, no, it was just like a convenience thing, you know? And it's so easy to find something to complain about. Like, that's like air coming out of your, out of your mouth. But to know that you have the possibility of not engaging in that, I think that's where that like super like courageous bravery, holding that integrity for yourself is so important, right? Because you maybe joining in the conversation and like complaining about your husband didn't feel right to you, but it would have resulted you with a connection to those people, right? So it's like you just sacrificed your like higher self of saying, I don't want to talk bad about my husband, right? But then you're like the outsider if you don't. Such a bold space to hold like your own.
I think there's a huge difference, and we can see if it resonates with anybody. I have a boatload of acquaintances. I have very few friends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a significant difference in that, like Christy, where you were talking about that, because to me, those aren't my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, it's like softball moms. We get together and we bitch about the coaches and we bitch about the other team and, their uniforms and the weather. I mean, all that kind of stuff. But those are not people that I would invite in, right? They're acquaintances. It doesn't mean I can't be pleasant or connect with them on that level, but they're not people that I'm going to choose, right? It's people I'm thrown into association with, whether it be a workplace. I have tons of work friends, but really they're just acquaintances. They don't get to know the real me. There's a few that get to know the real me, but not very many. And like I was talking earlier about that superficial stuff, I can do that all day long. I'm very practiced at that. But those are acquaintance level things, not friend things. So back to Tanya's story, we were acquaintances, but we weren't friends, not then. Because I couldn't get beyond that, not knowing the story behind it, to say, I can let you in for that. I'm just like, wait a minute, that's too much. I can't handle that. But I can chit chat about the dive stuff, right? I can be very superficial and chat about the dive stuff all day long. So I think there's a significant difference between what is a friend, that true connection, that intimacy, versus socializing acquaintances. I think it's a big difference.
I think I threw everybody into the friend bucket. Like there was somebody, I wish I could give this person credit because I have no idea where this came from. It was a podcast that I listened to about relationships, and it talked about like 3 layers of a circle, like an onion kind of. And like in the middle would be like yourself, maybe your spouse, like your very best friend. The next level would be people that you trust, but maybe you're not going to like go to them with your intimate details. And then the external would be the people that, like the softball games and the grocery stores. And I think I just put everybody into the middle. Like I didn't realize there were different layers and different types of friends, and that there's fluidity too, right? Kind of like when you get out of season with someone or they get out of season with you, whatever, right? I took any kind of change in friendship like tragic.
I think that's a real love thing to do, right? Because
That makes sense now. Mhm.
as like out of balance, more in that love space, it's usually like in attachment language, it would be the person I think that is ambivalent, right? It's the we want to put everybody into the friend bucket. We want to put them right into the very center. And I love that analogy that you used about the layers, because I think what we oftentimes miss is that we are at the very center of all of that. And then our family, our friends, our children, mostly our spouse and our children are like that next layer out. And then our family just outside of that. And then our friends and community just outside of that. But it's such a love thing to do, like talking about the control aspect. Control is present in power and it's present in love, but how it shows up is a little different. Like for you and I to put everyone immediately into the friend place, that's that overbalance of love in the sense that we want to create some sort of intimacy. We want to create a connection that says, don't leave me.
Yes.
Don't leave me, right?
Yes.
Love me, don't leave me. Let me be lovable for you. I'll change my body. I'll control what I eat. I'll control how I work
Everything.
out. I'll control all of these things, right? And power does it a little differently, right? They're like, I'm going to remove myself from that situation. I'm going to create some distance. I can do the superficial thing, but I'm not going to put everybody into the friend bucket because, like, you don't get to
Not
go in there.
safe.
Yeah. And so, like, to bring that into balance, into harmony, whether it's love or power that has been out of balance, requires us to find our safety. It requires us to find our worthiness and our value. And all of that has to be like right in here. Can't come from anywhere else. But we're so busy looking outside of us where we can't find it.
And I
that we
think for the longest time, and I know, did everybody say that they were people pleasers? It's hard for me to see on the screen.
Yeah.
To me, I feel like my whole life, I've been applauded and praised for being a helper. And so when I started to go inward, that was one of the things that I started to recognize was like my yeses and my nos, and where I was spending my energy and like what conversations I would just kind of exclude myself from, or situations I would no longer say yes to. And that was like the most super vulnerable, probably the most vulnerable thing I did before stepping into the world of coaching and like actually somebody like working with me through all of those emotions. Saying no to people, because that was my worthiness. That was my value my whole life. So to think that I could make myself happy first was not even a possibility. It was like sinful, right? Like, how dare you? I told you all what my son said to me the other day, didn't I? About you should go sit on the couch and watch football with dad. And I was like, I don't want to. And he was like, your husband is trying to connect with you. Keep in mind, he's 14. Your husband is trying to connect with you. And I was like, but I don't want to watch football. I would have not said that 5 years ago. I would have been like, you're right. I should go sit on that couch and watch a game I have no desire to even like exert any energy towards. It felt great to show my son, like, no, it's actually okay. I love your father and he loves me. Just because I said no to football doesn't mean I said no to him, you know?
Past story says saying no is a removal of connection.
Yes. Yes.
And I also want to say, true connection usually doesn't happen with the TV on,
Of course,
no matter
right?
what's on, right? You can be
I
on
don't
the
know that my
couch,
husband's gonna agree with that statement, but I do.
right? Because either you're involved with what's on the screen, or they're involved in what's on the
Of
screen, or the both of you are involved with what's on the screen, and there's no connection. There's proximity, but not connection.
I will say we started that Netflix series, so we're like, it's almost like a docu-series type of thing. So we're kind of learning together. I don't know. He would argue, and I totally agree with you, Brenda. I'm not a huge TV fan unless like there's conversation, right? Like if it's stimulating to the mind, like we'll watch a murder mystery or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, who do you think did it? Right. And it's like that's our connection. That just
Yeah.
gave us something to talk about.
Well, in technology world, you can put the TV, live TV on pause now, right? And you can have a conversation
Yeah.
and then go back to it, whereas not even very
Back
many
in the
years
day.
ago, that wasn't a
Mhm.
possibility.
Oh yeah.
Right? Unless it was a movie and you had the controls then, but yeah.
Yep.
I know some of the TV shows that we've watched have been great conversation starters when we've gone for a walk afterwards.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of, I'll see a lot of what I'm in the process of learning and expanding and growing into represented in something in a TV show or whatever, or in nature. Like if we're
Always.
watching something about nature. So,
I love synchronicity.
mhm.
So cool.
Yep, synchronicities and serendipities. One of my favorite words.
Well, that could be a fun chat.
Yeah,
Synchronicities and serendipity.
serendipities. Yeah. Well, ladies.
I'm like, it is almost exactly 4:00.
Yes. Yes, it is. 4:00 here in Florida, where I'm about to leave. 4:00 in Louisville.
Yeah.
3:00 in Texas. What time is it in Hawaii right now?
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
On Tuesday.
No,
Monday?
I'm still Monday. We're the same day of the week.
No
West
idea. I'm like, hold on, let me get my map out.
If it's midnight for you going into 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm still in my evening, but eventually I catch up and we're usually daylight on the same day together.
Oh, that's really fun. That's really fun.
All right,
That's
all
the
of you.
tape.
We did
Go ahead.
it. We did it.
Hooray. Hooray.
I love each and every one of you so fucking much.
I love this. This like just makes my soul warm.
Mhm. Me too.
Good stuff.
Mhm.